the Nile as far as Thebes and Karnak. He celebrated the festival of Neith in the ancient city of Sais, where stands the ever-veiled statue of this goddess with its inscription, "I am all that has been, and is, and shall be, and my veil no mortal has withdrawn." All of these travels were carefully recorded and preserved. The record of Apollonius's life is complete. It was written by a personal friend and a devotee of Apollonius. Who was that? It was Damis. He attaches himself, as we shall find out a little bit later, to Apollonius and becomes a disciple, and he traveled with him as Ananda did with Buddha for 50 years. The compiler of the work is Philostratus, and Domna, wife of Emperor Hadrian, is the one that gives this task to Philostratus from the notes that was gathered by Damis, and he writes this book. The book is in Greek. There's a copy of it in the Library of Congress. This student could not get hands on any translation, this book was written in 210 AD. 1800, an Irishman translated the Greek version, Berwick, into English with tremendous apologies, because the book shows tremendous similarities to Jesus Christ's life. However, the Gospels did not come out after the end of the 3rd century, so this book was written first, not the Gospels. The Gospels were written 320 onwards. This is 210. This student is presenting this material for perusal by yourselves, and you can all draw your own conclusions yourselves. This is the book that this student tried to get a hold of, but there does not seem to be any copies, but haven't stopped looking for it yet. Today it says, many are unaware of the similarities. The world of the 2nd and 3rd centuries was only too well aware of them. The church of that day was basing its claim of Jesus' divinity upon the miracles that he is said to have performed. But Apollonius was performing the same miracles before their eyes, and at the same time refusing to call them miracles, claiming them to be but expressions of natural law. One day Apollonius met a funeral procession, asked them to put it down, and once it was stopped, he made well, how should we say it? He conducted a revival session, and the girl got up and walked. In a few moments the maid arose and joined her friends. Apollonius was asked how such miracles were possible, and his answer is, quotation, "There is no death of anything save in appearance. That which passes over from essence to nature seems to be birth, and what passes over from nature to essence seems to be death. Nothing really is originated, and nothing ever perishes, but only now comes into sight and now vanishes. It appears by reason of the density of matter, and disappears by reason of the tenuity of essence. But it is always the same, differing only in motion and condition." The miracles, in quotation marks, performed by Apollonius caused great consternation in the young Christian church, and the Christian church father Justin Martyr of the 2nd century pertinently asked, quotation, How is it that the talismans of Apollonius have power over certain members of creation? For they prevent, as we see, the fury of the waves, the violence of the winds, and the attack of wild beasts. And whilst our Lord's miracles are preserved by tradition alone, those of Apollonius are most numerous, and actually manifested in the present facts, so as to lead astray all beholders. Ralston Skinner, author of The Source of Measures, is mentioned in this book that just came out in Holland. HPP says that he was her student. Interesting. So Ralston Skinner says, quotation, well, let me reread it. Ralston Skinner, author of The Source of Measures, believes that this similarity serves to explain why the life of Apollonius of Tyana by Philostratus has been so carefully kept back from translation and popular reading. He says that those who have studied his work in the original are forced to the conclusion that either the life of Apollonius has been taken from the New Testament, or that the New Testament was taken from Philostratus's work. As the New Testament did not appear until over 100 years after the publication of this book, then we leave the reader to draw his own conclusions. Philostratus probably knew the commotion his book would cause in the Christian world, for he was a devoted admirer of Pythagoras, and as such must have taken pleasure in bringing into public notice the noble character of one who was a strict and zealous follower of the Pythagorean school. In defending the position of Apollonius, Philostratus says, quote, "Some consider him as one of the Magi, because he conversed with the Magi of Babylon, and the Brahmans of India, and the gymnosophists of Egypt. But even his wisdom is reviled, as being acquired by the magic art, so erroneous are the opinions formed of him. Whereas Empedocles, Pythagoras, and Democritus, though they converse with the same Magi, and advance many paradoxical sentiments, have not fallen under the like imputation. Even Plato, who travelled in Egypt and blended with his doctrines many opinions collected there from the priests and prophets, incurred not such a suspicion, though envied above all men on account of his superior wisdom. Philostratus then must be admired as one of those who called for a restitution of borrowed robes and the vindication of calumniated but glorious reputations. And bringing certain parts of this old book to the notice of the theosophical students of today, the same object is kept in view. Now, this book was criticized in Mead's book that this student has read for this talk, saying that Philostratus embellishes it. And this is the theosophical viewpoint coming from the Master's Lodge. This book, like others of a similar character, has both a literal and a symbolic meaning. If it is studied symbolically, it will be found to contain the whole of the Hermetic philosophy. Apollonius's journey to India represents the trials of a neophyte, and his conversations with the sages of Kashmir would, if properly interpreted, give the esoteric catechism. Many of the secret dogmas of Hermes are explained in symbolical language by the great adept Iarches, and his word would disclose, if understood, some of the most important secrets of nature. So, as said, Apollonius was born 1 AD. In Cappadocia, and he came from an aristocratic line. And whilst his mother was with child, Proteus, the Egyptian god, appeared to her, and when she asked what she should bring forth, the reply was, "Thou shalt bring forth me." When she asked him again, he said he was the Egyptian god Proteus, and he was being brought into life through her. Let's put the Ashram piece. This is the temple. Where he's inducted into the mysteries. Later on, he changed it into a lyceum where he taught. At the end of his stay here at the temple, he went to Antioch, where he taught for many years. And his biographer, Treadwell, makes this a statement. He maintained that the only good was moral excellence, the only true satisfaction, independence of external circumstances, and consequently held that wealth was an obstacle to the development of virtue. The whole of his life was spent, the whole of his teachings are founded on the idea that all men are called to receive and practice truth, who speaks and acts as a reformer everywhere. He had no narrow notions of nationality, no local clique to serve. He came to no chosen people, but to all mankind. All during his years, his thoughts had been fixed on far-off India, where he had been told that those Mahatmas lived, who stood nearest to the source of wisdom. During his stay in Antioch, I don't know, it is somewhere on one of these maps. I don't see it, but it'll show up somewhere. He had 7 disciples, but when he told them he wanted to go to India, they dispersed. The journey did not interest them. So he had only 2 scribes with him when he started his journey to India. But on that journey, when they reached Ninus, which is Nineveh, Babylonia, Damis, the young man, attached himself to Apollonius and accompanied him all through his wanderings. Once their arrangements were completed, they started this journey from here, Africa and Egypt, and their first stop was Babylon, where Apollonius met the Magi, and he was introduced and inducted and initiated into the Chaldean mysteries. The king of Babylon became his friend and furnished him with camels and a guide to take them to India. On this very long journey, we see that Apollonius instructs Damis, and so they continue on until they come to the Indian Kush. I'm not going to go through their journeys, it's very lengthy. And here's another little map.